As always, I have one of my colleagues. I believe Dylan Cleaver seems to be missing. We're not sure what's going on there. Of course, Dylan Cleaver, the extreme sport and fitness after 50 guru. So hopefully he may join us later on the podcast. We're not sure. But I do have the oracle of all things cricket, Paul Ford. And Paul, g'day, mate. How are you going?
I'm doing terrific. Yeah, a few late nights watching cricket, Jace. And
mate.
A bit of BYC actually on the Whangamata beach this week. Nothing better than summer on the beach, whacking your son into the waves. You know, it's a great feeling. Still.
I can imagine, my friend. Well, great to know that you're in a beautiful place and great to have you on board. Now, listen, let's kick off with the Ashes series, the shambles that was England. Let's get, first of all, Paul, your broad overview of the series. I mean, I said at the beginning of the series that I was predicting a 5-0 down trail. They weren't far off, the Aussies. They were perilously close.
Oh, I mean, this was a tour from hell. I don't think there's any other way really to describe it. And as you said, that, you know, the scene was set with that in-swinging Yorker, Stark to Burns, the first ball of the series, just the portent of doom. And you know, as you just said, that was the closest thing to a whitewash you could get. I mean, it was 4.99 rather than 5-0. It was one delivery, one wicket, one ball away from 5-0 following the great escape in Sydney, that desperate draw. But you know, it was just absolutely limp. It was a embarrassing, one-sided, almost I mean, don't get me wrong, I love watching the cricket, but it got tedious because you knew England were going to collapse or concede 1,000 runs at any point, and it just felt like a huge mismatch across all facets of the game.
Well, you know, mate, and the commentators were talking about this a lot actually throughout the series. If you went man for man, you know, in terms of the teams, Australia were just too good. And I have to say this, England were, yes, let's all agree, substantially below par. But that bowling attack, particularly with Boland coming into the whole thing, was just so dominant. And I would actually challenge any international batting lineup to face that barrage. You've got your Cummins, you've got your Stark, Boland, you've got your Green. And it was just a relentless, there was just no relief for the batsmen at any stage during that tour.
No, and I think, you know, I guess India did that a year ago, you know, yes, to their credit. But it just felt like that England team they just didn't have the batting heft, I guess, to keep them out for long periods of time. And that's what you've got to do against the Aussies, isn't it? You've got to have your guys like Pujara, Rahane, who can just pitch a tent and just bat for hours and hours and hours until they get tired and then pick them off. If you're going to keep their dander up by, you know, losing a wicket every 2 overs or whatever the average ended up being for England, they're just going to keep steaming in. They're just too good to keep leaving the door ajar for.
Well, one of the things we were talking about in terms of the English side too, of course, was the opening partnership. We all, I think, agreed that was a real area of vulnerability for the English, and that proved to be the case. Apart from, of course, the second innings of the final test where they actually, you know, got some runs. I mean, I'll be honest with you, mate, Burns having his hair out of his ponytail and his helmet was just a little bit too much for me, being the traditionalist that I am. But, you know, I guess in terms of looking at the opening partnership, for example, and they were getting off to atrocious start after atrocious start. Crawley looks to have some potential. He looks a bloody good player. But he kind of reminded me a way of the English player Mince. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
In that he would look absolutely majestic and magnificent, getting to 30 or 40 and then lose his wicket. But I think they should persist with him. And you look at Milan at the start of the series, Root sort of at the start of the series. They were the sort of mainstays. Bairstow, of course, the only one getting 100 in the entire series. Stokes was below his best and seemed to be battling every kind of physical demon there was to battle. And the English just simply went up to it, mate. There were moments where you felt like they were fighting back, but they were incapable of pressing any kind of advantage that they'd gained.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And I think, you know, they made some really weird selections too. I mean, I guess I look at a guy like David Milan, who would have looked great in Perth. That, you know, he was basically picked for those types of decks, and instead there he is, pink ball, under lights, in the sorted humidity and the sort of moist environment of Tasmania, with a premature baby about to arrive on his wife's doorstep, you know, 10,000 miles away up in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
I mean, a guy like that is just in such a difficult position. A guy like Hazim Hamid, he just never looked like he was going to score runs. He looked like he was going to get out every ball. I know they had some chances and they survived in bits and pieces, but overall they just looked massively out of their depth. I agree with you about Crawley. I mean, they do go on about him coming down, not through the ball, coming down from the side, and saying that that's obviously a technical adjustment that you need, particularly in conditions like you'll find in Australia. But I agree with you. He absolutely looks $1 million, well worth persisting with. Burns is just one of those guys that it's just so ugly, but you know, occasionally successful, has scored runs against New Zealand, unfortunately. So hard for us to bag him too much, I guess. But
I actually, because he was really struggling for form, Burns, but I do believe actually there's something about the guy, and I think there's something, and you're right. I mean, he looks like he's having some sort of fit when he's batting, but he's all over the place. But I probably, you know, I think they erred in keeping Hamid instead of keeping with Burns. I think that was a mistake they made. The question I've got to ask you, at the end of that tour, do you think that Joe Root's genitals would be pork mince?
Oh,
I mean, how many times can you get hit in that area? It was unbelievable. And that ball, after having injured himself on that day that he got from Stark, every man in the world watching that just groaned in pain.
I know, that's right. I mean, someone like him, he's had all the emotional heartbreak of the 4.990 Ashes defeat, all of the drama, all the palaver around being the captain of one of the most ignominious sides in English cricket history. And not only is his brain going to be addled, but as you say, his testicles as well. It's a terrible combination.
Well, look, as we've just been talking about, I think the Australian bowlers were absolutely outstanding. Let's be honest about it. But I don't know how you felt as the tour sort of went on. Some frailties began to show themselves in terms of the Australian batting lineup. And can I talk Labuschagne? Can I talk Smith in terms of, you know, the two Australian batsmen we hate the most, and letting aside Warner and indeed Warner to a certain extent? I believe maybe a few chinks in the armour of those two players. I mean, we started the whole short ball to Smith kind of idea, and other teams seem to be persisting with that.
Yeah, that's right. I think both of those guys, I was going to say, had a quiet series. I mean, you never describe Labuschagne as quiet. No. You know what I mean? Averaged
money
to himself, averaged below what he averages in Test cricket across the series, and provided a bunch of chances. Just looked a bit out of sorts, almost sort of hyper nervous or something. I'm not sure. And as you say, Smith's just addicted to that hook shot and that leg side play. And as you say, it was maybe a little bit like that Ross Taylor situation where maybe his eyes and his hand to eyes just drop 1%, and it's kind of enough for someone like Mark Wood, who can bowl, 150 clicks. Just as you say, it provides a chink for him to get through.
Yeah. And it would be, from a batting perspective, quite a hard thing. I mean, you've got to have a plan of action. And it looks to me like Smith at the moment is a little bit flustered by it. He's not quite sure how to play it, whether he just gets out of the way. But you're right, there is an element of the compulsive about the fact that he likes to hook. I mean, let's try and look at some positives for England. Mark Wood, obviously, heart and soul, 150% all the time, desperately unlucky at times, got his just desserts in that second innings against Australia in the final test. He was a positive, and I'm really struggling to see others.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would probably... So, yeah, that 6 for 37 was amazing. And can there be anything more heartbreaking than a bowler like him, if they're a lion-hearted effort like that, getting 6 for 37 and then having to be back out batting, 75 minutes later?
Yeah.
Something like that. I mean, poor bugger. I really felt for him. Look, I think Bairstow is another one that's probably, as you say, I think Wood would be player of the series for England, but I think Bairstow did well. I mean, he scored 100. He didn't get picked for a lot of the test matches, and he batted superbly. So, I'd probably throw him in the mix mean, why are they dicking this guy around? He's good enough to be in that team. They should just keep him in there. That'd be the other one. Geez, apart from that, I mean, your heart's got to go out to Joe Root as well. I mean, he was still, I think, third highest run scorer in the series. Obviously, didn't get the ton that he so desired. I don't know. I want to slag him off as a captain as well, and I don't think he's an amazing captain.
Yes,
but I think when you are going to get rolled and you're going to lose 8 for 80 and 7 for 70 and 10 for 65 or whatever it was in that last innings, you're not going to win a hell of a lot of test matches, no matter what your bowling up resources are like, and no matter what your captaincy approach is like.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a horrendous capitulation in that final test match. I'll be honest with you, mate. I went to bed with England 80-odd for 2. And I was thinking to myself, actually, these guys are making a real fight of this, and there's a real possibility they could get there. Woke up in the morning, looked at my phone, all out for 124 or something. I could not believe it. And I think it just all unravelled at the end, didn't it? And it was just that the pressure was just too much. I mean, having said that, Boland, talk about taking your chance. I mean, just extraordinary. And he is just relentless, isn't he, in terms of his line and his pace. He just keeps in the same spot. He would be a nightmare to face.
Oh, yeah, awful. And again, got the entire Australian, he's a cult hero over there for the rest of his life.
Yes.
This series has changed his life. Everywhere, he never have to pay for a beer again. He's just going to have people loving him forever after that 6 for 7. And yeah, what an amazing person to have. I mean, he's been playing, I can't remember what it is, it's like multiple years of first-class cricket. He's no spring chicken. So he would have bowled some big, long, hard spells. He knows where to put the ball in on those decks in Australia. And he was absolutely extraordinary.
And he's also that extraordinary thing, a humble Australian.
You know what I mean? Oxymoron.
He's obviously one of those guys that, is really uncomfortable in the limelight. And just is obviously pretty humble, but good luck to him. He looks a player of the future for sure.
18 wickets at 9.55. Shouldn't he? Maybe he should just retire.
I reckon. Why not? So there we go. That's the Ashes covered off. Let's talk New Zealand cricket. The Aussie tour speculation. They may not make it here, mate. There's a lot of issues going on as well, we know.
Yeah, I think there's just a bit of drama around the MIQ situation, I think. So, yeah, there was a story on News Hub earlier this week, which talked about the return series where Australia are coming out here to play some T20s and so on, being unlikely to be held in New Zealand, and that would actually be, I guess, transformed into a T20 series in Australia so that fewer teams don't have to come through the MIQ process. So, yeah, look, I guess it'd be incredibly frustrating, but it's kind of understandable in this world. I don't think anyone's going to be pointing the finger or laying blame at anyone. It's just everyone just has to roll with the punches in these COVID times, but it really sucks.
Yeah, it really does, mate. And same with the South African tour as well. That's sort of under the gun at the moment.
I mean, the case in point, I guess, was, I was looking this morning, the last one-dayer that New Zealand played was in Wellington at the end of March 2021. So we haven't played a one-dayer for, what's that, 10 months? It's crazy. It's unbelievable. That was the 3-0 win against Bangladesh where Conway got 120 odd.
Yeah. Just on that, who would make your tests? Your one-day side with no test players available? Just off the top of your head. Yeah,
it's tricky, eh? Like if you go through, so you'd have no Latham, no Conway, Williamson, Nichols. It's safe to assume Will Young would be in that team. Bolt, Jamison, Southey. And then you've got to work out what you do with those guys on the edge. Your Daryl Mitchells, your Matt Henry. So I guess I'm assuming that those guys are all sort of wrapped up in the test squad. So my team would be Seifert and Guptill. George Worker, I think, is worth a recall. Mark Chapman, Ross Taylor would probably be your skipper. Colin de Grandhomme, Jimmy Neesham, Mitchell Santner, Lockie Ferguson, Ish Sodhi, and Adam Milne. And then I've kind of got a few other guys that are in the mix. Glenn Phillips. I'd like to give this young fella Ashok Patel a go from the New Zealand under-19s.
How exciting does he look, man? He looks a real player, Ashok, of the future, that's for sure.
And then Anaru Kitchen, I think, was just another guy that was kind of in the mix. So that was kind of my
Can
squad.
I check another couple in the mix for you, just on your team there? Cleaver and Bracewell.
Michael Bracewell.
Yeah.
Or Doug. Or both.
No, Michael Bracewell from Wellington, the Wellington skipper there. I've been watching a lot of the Super Smash. He's impressed me immensely. Of course, what an innings.
At Pukakura Park, it was unbelievable.
Just 140 odd, magnificent. And he looks to have a good cricketing head on his shoulders. And I wonder with Cleaver from Central Districts, just because he's been in such sensational form, that you just give him a bit of a blast, a bit of a run.
Well, and after all, we've probably only got 2 or 3 wicket keepers in our team at the moment, so we like to run with 4 or 5. So why not chuck another wicket keeper in there? Yeah, I'd be happy to see D Cleaver, the real D Cleaver, in that squad as well. It could be an interesting one.
And I think Ashok is definitely worth a look. Also, I'm thinking just off the top of my head, the left arm opening bowler for Auckland,
Lister.
He's massively impressed me. He hoops it around. He's a big, tall lad, gets a lot of movement with the ball, and he has been really impressive in the Super Smash.
Yeah, that's right. There's a good crop to choose from. I guess the weird thing is that we're mainly going to be playing 50 over matches, and you've really got to scratch around, get along to the basin, or take a day's leave in the middle of the week, or find it on YouTube to watch these 50 over games. Pretty tricky to track down. So it'd be interesting to see whether they use the 50 over Ford Trophy form, or whether they do take a bit of a lead from how players are performing in the Super Smash.
Yeah. And speaking of the Super Smash, ND and Canterbury are top of the men's, Wally and Otago top of the female competition. Have you been watching much of the Super Smash? Personally, Paul, I'm not a big fan of T20, but I've been loving the Super Smash, and actually, just quite sincerely looking at the emerging talent that's coming through. Our game is in good shape, mate.
Oh, I agree with that. And I guess what I like is the fact that you've got some of these, some of the Black Caps drifting back into these games too. So,
yes.
You've got, as you say, those young guys, Ashok and co, coming up. And of course, the New Zealand under-19 team should be away playing the World Cup. So a bunch of these guys wouldn't be playing in this in the T20 tournament because they'd be overseas, but for COVID. So there's that generation of under-19 guys is playing, and then you're getting guys like Latham, de Grandhomme's floating around. I think I saw Mitchell was floating back into T20 stuff as well. So Neesham's in there. So there's kind of like there's a lovely blend there. And I think I love watching Colin de Grandhomme play. So he was one that's caught my eye a couple of times over the past week, and great to see him coming back into some form for Northern Districts. Yeah,
well, he's an exciting player, and he's built like a brick shithouse, isn't he? And he can certainly give the ball a bit of a tonk. So that's been fantastic. Hey, let's talk about, I don't know if you've been watching much of this, Paul, the India-South African series, and boy, talk about contentious. If you had said to me at the start of that series that South Africa were going to take it out 2-1, I would never have believed you, but they did. But there was some real ill feeling in that test series, so much so, of course, that the Indians kind of losing the plot at the end in the final test. Yeah,
it was weird. And it was almost it was niggle that wasn't really between the two teams. There were some great confrontations, I think, between, particularly the guys like Rabada and Kohli, but it wasn't between the teams. It was almost between, it was between India and the coverage provider SuperSport, with some sort of, and then also a bit of crankiness with the way the DRS system was working. I mean, just feels to me like India and Kohli got distracted by that. And South Africa, they should not have won that series. I mean, they are in transition, I guess is the trendy way of describing it. They've got De Kock obviously pulled out middle of the series.
Yeah.
They had their fastest bowler, Henrik Nortje, was injured, and you had this young fella, Marco Jansen, come in. He looks an absolute real handful.
Yeah, he does.
So it's one of those, I guess, great things of cricket that India never beat South Africa in South Africa, and they failed to do so yet again. It was a really memorable 2-1 series win for the Proteas.
Yeah, it was. And as I say, I reckon pretty unexpected. But I think what the South Africans were able to do is get under the Indian skins. And once you start doing that, we all know Kohli's a temperamental type of fella. And once he starts losing the plot, you know you're on the right line. Having said that, looking at, the ball that Ashwin bowled to Elgar, given out LBW by Erasmus, and you see it quite often with the DRS, etc. That looked plumb for all money. Then the DRS comes up, of course, and the ball's hooping over the stumps. You can understand the player's frustration, but screaming into the microphone on the pitch is not the way to go about it. But
totally.
Full credit to the South Africans, and let's hope they get over here, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're a pretty interesting team. As I say, they got some big, scary, brutish fast bowlers. Dwayne Olivier is another one.
Yes.
I mentioned Nortje. Jansen's got a twin brother, I think, as well, who's the same size and also bowls thunderbolts.
I think just on Jansen, I think it was actually Kohli that sort of discovered him, wasn't it?
Absolutely, it was. Yeah, basically got him over to be a net bowler in the IPL, and then suddenly there he is, drafted in and getting Kohli out in Test matches to win series. It's pretty extraordinary. The other guy that caught my eye is Keegan Peterson. I don't know a hell of a lot about him, but I thought, he's a new young guy and all that sort of stuff. Then you have a look at his record. He made his first class debut in South Africa in 2012. So this guy's played first class cricket for 9 years.
Wow.
He's 28 years old. He's only just come into the South African team in the last 12 months or so. He is a superb player. And a bit like Conway, he's come in, he knows his game. He's probably been in a whole lot of difficult situations, just doesn't seem particularly phased by anything. And he was magnificent in throughout the series. I think he was the highest run scorer, but particularly under all that pressure of trying to win that series in that third match, really anchored the team with a magnificent 82 for the Saffers. Yeah,
and it seems to me, in terms of cricketers being in their prime, that sort of 28, 29 age range seems to be, you mentioned Conway, he was similar time into the Test situation where they've developed their game, they're confident in their game, and they know what they're about. It seems to be 28 or 29 is the perfect age.
Yeah, well, and even, we mentioned Scott Boland before. He's a little bit older, but same theory applies, right?
Yeah.
10 years of first-class cricket, probably going to be okay at Test cricket.
Yes. Hey, and just on that, as we say, it was a controversial series, but full credit to South Africa. Kohli steps down as captain. Now, I've got the feeling, actually, that it wasn't just about the end of that Test match, of course, that's kind of been brewing. But nonetheless, it was news that took the cricketing world by surprise, I guess.
Yeah, well, you had him, I guess it's been there's been 3 steps in his demise as captain. He quit as the T20 captain last year. Then the Indian selector said, "Hey, we've had enough of you around the one day as two. Thanks, mate." And then he's pulled out from as Test captain. It's going to be pretty interesting. I think when I think of Virat Kohli, I don't particularly like him, but I sense that there is a great sense of mutual respect between him and the New Zealand team, and in particular, he's got a pretty good relationship with Kane Williamson, and there is a good fraternity, I think, between the New Zealand team and the Indian team. And I think we're a very hard team to hate, and India are a pretty easy team to hate, but we don't seem to have got sucked into that and given them that, if you like, that kind of incentive to beat us. It's going to be interesting, though, to see how his ego, whether it stays in check under 3 different captains. In particular, as in the Test matches, whoever they bring through as captain. Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to see whether he can keep his sword in its scabbard when he sees things he doesn't like.
Absolutely, and unquestionably too, at the same time, it's going to be a real challenge for whoever takes over the captaincy, when you've got the Kohli in there. But and you're right in terms of the relationship between New Zealand cricket and Indian cricket seems to be very good, and I think it was Kohli who was saying, New Zealand plays cricket the right way. I know that Kohli has had a really contentious sort of relationship with Australia. They really get under his skin. Seems like the South Africans have done the same. And he is an emotional type character, pretty feisty too. And so that's not always a great thing when you're skipper, when you sort of lose the plot and start screaming at microphones. Hey, but let's move on. One of the favourite parts of our podcast, of course, is Paul Ford's News or Ruse.
Yeah, it's 0-0 after last week's painfully easy Yorkshire cricketing coaching ruse. Jace, I'd question whether Mike Lane even tried on your behalf with his guess.
Yeah,
so anxious is he to see you fail.
The lazy SOB.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I told him that.
Thanks.
Olympic rowing champion Emma Twigg switched her boat for a bat and been named in the Northern District's Women's A cricket squad. Cambridge-based Twigg, gold medal winner in the single sculls at the Tokyo Olympics last year, is in the ND second 11 side to play Auckland A in 2 T20s at your favourite Melville Park in Auckland, Jace.
Yeah,
Twigg
nice.
has been acting as a mentor this season for the ND women's first 11 one-day and T20 sides, and she will play as a batter. Number 2, Pakistan paceman Mohammad Hasnain has just finished a productive 5-game stint with Sydney Thunder in the Big Bash League, but will now undergo a test at the ICC-accredited biomechanics laboratory in Lahore. Hasnain, who bowled an alleged 155-kilometre-hour delivery in the CPL earlier this year, has played 8 ODIs and 18 T20s for Pakistan since debuting in 2019. He replaced Kiwi paceman Adam Milne and made a strong impact in his debut season at the BBL, taking 7 wickets from 5 matches at an average of 16. If he's found to have an illegal action, he could be suspended from bowling in international and domestic cricket, which will really mess up his pay packet for the upcoming Pakistan Super League. And number 3, nerd alert, Chennai-born Arun Kumar Manikavasagam's become the first official scorer for New Zealand cricket of Indian origin. After growing up in India in 2014, he moved to New Zealand to complete a PhD in mechanical engineering. My interest in cricket grew from watching TV and listening to commentators like Tony Greig, Jeff Boycott, and Harsha Bhogle. I like this bit. I started doing things that most kids do, imitating their voices, recording myself, and standing in front of a mirror and doing my own post-match presentations, Aaron told the Hindustan Times. One thing led to another. He's now joined the New Zealand Cricket Scorers Panel and recently made his test debut during Ross Taylor's farewell game.
Oh,
inspirational stuff.
Yeah, beautiful, mate, beautiful. I'm going to.
Yeah, 2 is correct. Well played. Off the mark. He replaced Saqib Mahmood, not Adam Milne.
Do I get 2 points for that? Since
okay,
yeah, thanks, mate.
Dylan, do you have any objection to that? Carry, 2-0.
Yeah, 2-0. Thank you very much. Also, we have Paul Ford's Violence Corner.
Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
Yeah, this story in the Jamaica Observer about cricket's meanest fast bowler ever caught my eye this week. His name was Roy Gilchrist. It's one that's hardly ever mentioned in any discussion of the game's fastest bowlers, but those who saw him in his prime reckon he could bowl a cricket ball as quickly as anyone who ever lived. The Garfield Sobers said the Jamaican was the fastest bowler he played with or against. Apparently, he once ran and landed a ball halfway down the pitch that smashed into the sight screen without bouncing. He had a temper. He played for the West Indies for a couple of years and had a tumultuous relationship with the authorities, including the captain. When he got slighted, he struck out and wasn't reluctant to resort to violence. Playing for the West Indies in a match against North Zone, he responded to some taunting by a player by trying to remove his head with a few beamers. The Windies captain said, "Oi, settle down." He didn't. And then Gilchrist was sent home and never played for the West Indies again. 57 wickets at 27 in 13 tests and was only 24 years old. He spent the rest of his cricketing days playing league cricket in England, where he took thousands of wickets. His incendiary nature came to the fore here too, and there is a report of him using a stump to physically reprimand a batsman, and they can be annoying. And in one match, Gilchrist played with a knife tucked into his socks. Unbelievable. A heated argument with his wife ended with him once applying a hot iron to his skin, and he was given 3 months probation for that. The judge said, "I hate to think that English sport has sunk so far that brutes will be tolerated because they are good at games." He died in 2001 from Parkinson's, aged 67. God, what a piece of work he sounds.
Yeah, geez. A lot of fun, a bag of fun.